Rome was a great empire that had crushed kingdoms, humbled rivals, and conquered much of the known world. Its legions were disciplined, ruthless, and seemingly unstoppable. But in 9 AD, in the forests of Germania, 3 Roman legions vanished, and with them vanished Rome's illusion of invincibility. Rome didn't dominate the world through chance. Its power was built on systems of discipline, structure, coordination, and control. The Roman legion was a machine designed to impose order onto chaos. They were nearly unmatched. By the time Rome turned its attention to Germania, it was no longer asking whether it could win. Rome knew that its system would function as it always had. One of Rome's generals was named Varus, and Varus didn't enter Germania as a general preparing for resistance. He moved as an administrator, operating within a system that had worked for centuries. He collected taxes, enforced Roman law, and moved throughout the territory with little caution. These moves weren't reckless or even foolish. They were consistent with how Rome governed its regions. But among the Germanic leaders in the region, Arminius occupied a position unlike most others. He had served within the Roman military system, received Roman citizenship, and learned firsthand how Roman command operated. To the Romans, this made him useful. He was someone who could help extend their influence into Germania through cooperation instead of force. But that proximity is precisely what made him so dangerous. Arminius understood the Roman system from the inside. He knew all about its habits, its confidence, and its dependence on intermediaries. So he didn't overcome Rome by meeting it head-on. He led it into conditions where its own structure, assumptions, and methods could no longer protect it. So under the pretense of loyalty, Arminius guided Varus and his legions off secure routes and deep into unfamiliar terrain. The legion's columns were stretched out as it moved through forest paths and were weighed down by supplies and non-combatants. Soon rain had followed, and the ground to mud, and slowed progress to a crawl. What had once been a controlled march became disordered and messy. Then the attacks began. Arminius had ambushed Rome. By the time the legions attempted to respond, they were already operating in an environment where their formations couldn't hold, their visibility was gone, and their system could no longer function. This incident would come to be known as the Varian disaster. What made the Varian disaster so significant was not that Rome was betrayed, but that its system could be turned against itself by someone it had helped shape. Arminius was dangerous precisely because Rome had made him trained, trusted, incorporated, and therefore underestimated. The empire wasn't compromised by something wholly external. It was compromised by a man who understood its methods well enough to redirect them into failure. This pattern appears elsewhere in history. Great powers often train, arm, or elevate local actors in order to extend influence beyond their immediate reach, only to find that those same networks later produce enemies who understand their methods intimately. In Afghanistan, for example, American support for anti-Soviet Mujahideen forces did not directly create the Taliban, but it did help shape the war-torn environment, networks, and combat experience out of which later hostile groups emerged. The point is the same in both cases, that systems don't just project power, but create the conditions under which that power can be studied, adapted to, and eventually turned back against them. Men like Arminius matter because they understand something well enough to lead it into its own demise. On a smaller scale, many of us know this pattern intimately. We trust friends, family, and those closest to us with the secret structures of our lives. And that trust gives them a knowledge strangers do not have. They know where we are weakest, where we are ashamed, and where we can be broken. Sometimes they protect that knowledge, sometimes they weaponize it. The scale may differ, but the principle doesn't. The most devastating wounds are often inflicted by those who stand close enough to know just exactly where to strike. The forest is long gone, the empire is gone, but the pattern remains. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Vale e buona fortuna. Bye-bye.